In what was once known as the Dutch East Indies, a tropical paradise, lush, beautiful, a young girl, Thelma Virginia Stufkens, known as Tamara, was born to parents of both Dutch and Indonesian descent. Her father, Jan Stufkens, was a soldier in the Dutch military intelligence. Her mother, Anna Lemers, was of both Indonesian and Dutch descent. Growing up on a plantation known as Bangsa Singa in the town of Garut on the island of West Java, Tamara's upbringing was one of great wealth and great privilege. But that would all come to end in March 1942, when the Japanese successfully invaded and conquered the Dutch East Indies. Here is her story of surviving war.
In March of 1942, the Japanese came marching down the streets, and I remember their uniforms, their khaki uniforms with a little cap, and their rifles with bayonets. And it seemed that that was the absolute end of that lifestyle period. We had a very affluent life where we lived with 4 generations in the house. My great-grandmother, my grandmother, my mother. Very soon after that, all Europeans were asked to register. We were given names that were special for the Japanese. We were given numbers. We didn't know why, but soon thereafter, we were all taken off on trucks, and we had to leave everything we owned. We were just simply taken, and we were taken to one of the many concentration camps that the Japanese had made. And my mother, my sister, and myself wound up in one concentration camp for women and children. And my father and my brother separately were taken to other camps. The worst thing that happened to me was when I was separated from my grandmother, because she had been everything to me in my life, and I was only 8 years old. The hunger was awful. I was forever hungry. I was a very angry child. And it was just a terrible experience. The Japanese were much more cruel towards women than they were towards men. And I remember that we had to bow very deeply when a Japanese soldier was anywhere in the area. And at one time, my mother didn't bow enough, and she was severely beaten in front of me. We had many such examples, which were very hard for a child to take. People were dying. Every day people were dying, children and women. And the trucks that would bring our food in the morning, they would load the dead bodies onto, and vice versa. So illnesses were rampant, but the Japanese, it was their aim to either starve you to death or have you die a little sooner. We had many such examples, which were very hard for a child to take. But again, I said I was a tough kid. And yes, I have always been an observer, because art has been an important issue, an important drive in my life. I drew all these pictures, and then one day I had no more paper, so I found a magnifying glass, and I discovered that if you hold the magnifying glass in a certain direction, the sun rays would go through and it would burn something. So I realized that if I had a piece of wood or a piece of bamboo, I could draw. And so I began to draw flowers and things, because bamboo is not very wide. And then one day I saw the boots of a Japanese soldier behind me, and he pushed me down, and he screamed that I was sending out messages to the world, Morse messages with the light. And I was taken to the commandant, and the commandant agreed that I had to be punished for that. And so I was dragged to the square where everything would take place, where people got punished and tortured. And I was bound up to a pole, and I stood there from morning till night. I was broken in body and soul. I just didn't know what was happening to the world. I didn't know what was happening to my life. And there was this whole thing that was wrong. But I kept on surviving, and I always had that pain in my stomach from hunger. And we lived on bare feet. We had hardly any shreds of clothes on us. And it was just incredible. And then there was word that the Allied forces had come and that the war would be over. And we didn't believe it. We thought that that was impossible, because at one point you just didn't believe anymore in freedom. And yeah, it was true. And again, that square, there were British British planes flying over, and they were dropping pamphlets. And we were all running into the square to get the pamphlet. And the pamphlet said, "The war is over, stay calm. We're coming back tomorrow, and we will drop food and medicine." And the Japanese, who were all standing around the territory, held with their bayonets, they allowed us to go onto the square and pick up the leaflets. And it was at that time when my mother called my sister and myself, and she said, "We are escaping tomorrow, and don't tell it to anybody." And the next day, when the planes were supposed to come, and they did with the pamphlets, and they dropped all the food and the medicine, everybody was on the square, and the Japanese were watching what was going on. And my mother led us to a vegetable patch where my sister used to work in, and it was open. See, I had no idea what was going on. I just followed my mother. It was open, and we scooted through the vegetable patch. And then there was a hole under the gate, and we crawled underneath it. And then my mother said, run for your life." And my mother and sister ran, but I wasn't quite as fast because I was small, my legs were shorter, and I ran as hard as I could, but I couldn't keep up with them. And it was sort of like in the evening, and I fell. And then the Japanese must have seen us, and they started shooting. Excuse me. They started shooting, and I remember all the bullets going around me, and I dug myself into the earth, and I just sat. And then, when the night had fallen, I dared crawl out, but I didn't know where to go. I was all by myself. I had no idea. So I just walked the street, and I went I saw a house that had a light, and I came in, I was completely covered with earth, and I walked in, and it was a miracle, because there was a woman. She said, come on in, shh, come on in. And when I walked in, she took me to a room that was further out, and it was lit, and there was my mother, and my sister, and my stepfather, and my brother. They had met them. My mother must have known, but she didn't share it. And there they were. And that was our escape.